right, let's just dive right in. Have you ever heard a story that just feels familiar? Like you've heard an echo of it somewhere else, in a different culture, maybe from a different time? Well, today we're going to chase down some of those echoes. We're going to explore some truly surprising connections between the foundational stories of the Abrahamic faiths and myths from civilizations that are much, much older. And the patterns we're about to see, they're pretty fascinating.
So let's start things off with a little bit of a puzzle. I'm going to give you the basic outline of a very famous story. See if you can guess who I'm talking about. Okay, so we have got a man. His name ends with AM. His wife's name starts with an S. They're forced out of their home and they head south with a relative whose name starts with an L. But on their journey, a powerful king, his name ending in N, kidnaps the wife. Is that ringing any bells for you? If your mind immediately jumped to the great Hindu epic, the Ramayana, you'd be spot on. It fits perfectly, right? You've got Ram, his wife Sita, his devoted brother Lakshman, and the powerful king of Lanka, Ravan. Seems like an open and shut case. But what if I told you there's another answer? Because here's the twist. That exact same structure also fits perfectly a core story from the Abrahamic faiths. A man named Abraham, his wife Sarah, their relative Lot, and the Egyptian pharaoh. The parallels are just, well, they're staggering, and they really set the stage for everything we're going to talk about today. Okay, so let's keep going and see how this pattern of shared stories is definitely not just a one-off coincidence. We're going to start with maybe the most famous disaster story of all time, a world-ending flood. So in the Abrahamic traditions, that's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, this story is a cornerstone. God looks down, sees that the world has become a wicked place, and decides it's time for a reset. He chooses one good man, Noah, and tells him, build a giant boat, an ark, because I'm sending a flood to wash everything away. And Noah is to save his family and 2 of every animal on earth. Now, let's jump over to ancient India. In the Hindu Puranas, we find the story of a wise king named Manu. He's also warned of a catastrophic flood. But his warning comes from a very different source. A tiny fish he saves. That fish, which grows to a massive size, turns out to be an avatar of the god Vishnu. And it tells Manu the exact same thing. Build a boat, gather living creatures and wise sages, and ride out the flood. And if we go even further back in time, way back to ancient Mesopotamia, we find the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is one of the oldest pieces of literature we have ever discovered, period. And what do we find in it? A sage named Utnapishtim who is warned by the gods that they're about to destroy the world with a great flood. His instructions? You guessed it, build a massive boat and save your family and the seeds of all living things. When you lay them out side by side like this, the pattern just jumps out at you, doesn't it? In each one, you have a good guy, a warning from a divine source, a giant boat as the only way to survive, a cargo of life, and a safe landing on a mountaintop when the waters go down. So what's going on here? Is this just an incredible coincidence, 3 times over? Or could these stories be echoes of a single ancient memory passed down through completely different cultures? All right, so from shared stories, let's pivot to a totally revolutionary idea, a massive shift in how humanity thought about the divine itself. We're talking about the huge leap from believing in many gods to believing in only one. To really get this, you have to picture the world that Abraham, or Abram as he was first called, was born into. It was a world full of gods. Polytheism was just how things were. People worshipped all sorts of deities, usually represented by statues or idols. And get this, Abram's own father, Terah, was in the business. He was a craftsman who made and sold these very idols. So the story goes that one day, Abram is left to mind the shop, and he decides he's going to make a point. He grabs a stick and just goes to town, smashing all the smaller idols into bits. Then he takes the stick and places it right in the hand of the biggest idol, the only one left standing. So when his father and the customers return and, understandably freak out, Abram has set the perfect trap for them. They demand to know what happened, and Abram, cool as can be, just says, "Oh, the idols got into a fight and the big one obviously won." Of course, they all scoff and say that's ridiculous. They're just statues, they can't speak or move. And that's when he's got them. He turns their own logic back on them and asks the big question. Then why do you worship them? If they can't speak or do anything, what good are they? And that story right there is the perfect illustration of this huge, world-changing shift in thinking. It dramatizes the move away from polytheism, the belief in many gods, which was common practice just about everywhere in the ancient world, to monotheism, the radical, revolutionary idea that there is only one single, all-powerful God. And that idea became the absolute bedrock for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So this one man, Abram, now renamed Abraham, becomes this incredibly pivotal figure. And his family story, it creates this massive fork in the road that, honestly, has shaped our world ever since. Now, this part of the story is deeply human and it's really complicated. Abraham and his wife, Sarah, are old and they're childless. So, following the customs of the time, Sarah suggests Abraham have a child with her servant, Hagar. And he does. His first son is born and they name him Ishmael. But then, a miracle happens. Against all odds, God grants Sarah a son in her old age, Isaac. And as you can imagine, this creates a lot of tension in the family, leading Sarah to demand that Hagar and Ishmael be sent away. Abraham is torn up about it, but God reassures him, promising that Ishmael too will be the father of a great nation. And this moment is that fork in the road. It's huge. On one path, you have the descendants of the second son, Isaac. His son Jacob, later renamed Israel, is said to be the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, which is the foundation of Judaism. Christians also trace their spiritual heritage through this line, seeing Jesus as a descendant of Isaac. Then, on the other path, you have the descendants of the first son, Ishmael. For Muslims, this lineage is central. They believe that Abraham and Ishmael built the sacred Kaaba in Mecca together, and they trace their spiritual line directly back to them. Okay, so we've got these incredible world-shaping stories. But let's be real, the big question is, are they just stories? Where does myth stop and actual provable history begin? Let's go look for some footprints in the sand. You know, one of the biggest, most tangible clues we have actually comes from archaeology. We've unearthed ancient clay tablets from Mesopotamia inscribed with the Epic of Gilgamesh. And here's the kicker. These tablets, which tell that flood story about Utnapishtim, are hundreds of years older than the earliest known written versions of the Noah story from the Bible. It strongly suggests this flood myth was just part of the cultural air people breathed in that part of the world, long before it was recorded as the story of Noah. This timeline really helps connect the dots. Look at this. Way back around 2100 BCE, you've got the Sumerian flood myth in writing. Then, more than 1,000 years go by before the Hebrew Bible is written down and compiled. And then we jump ahead again, a huge leap to 7th century Arabia. And now we're not talking about myth anymore. We are talking about recorded history. We know for a fact that the Quraysh tribe in Mecca worshipped a chief idol named Hubal, and we know that in 630 AD, the Prophet Muhammad broke that idol, cementing the return of Abraham's monotheism to that very spot. It's a fascinating journey from an ancient, shared story all the way to a specific, documented, historical event. So what does all of this really show us? I think it's just how deeply connected our most foundational stories really are. From global floods to family trees, these narratives were shared, they were adapted, and they were retold across thousands of years and countless cultures. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, right? If our oldest, most sacred stories reveal such deep, shared roots, what does that say about us, about our shared humanity, and maybe even more importantly, what does it mean for the stories we all choose to tell ourselves today?